what your reaction was to the sad message the judge?
Well, me personally is not surprised of this actual sentencing, being that I know that the president of the police union made it a discretionary call to represent Johannes Mesley, who is an ex-police officer. Unprecedented. Everything in this case has been unprecedented. The reason why he did that was because of the significance that this case meant to police officers across the United States. This whole intent was to do the best fight so that he would not be incarcerated or receive any prison time. And if I go on to evaluate this whole criminal justice system, yes, I believe it's a racist criminal justice system. This is the biggest prison population in the world. 80% of the men in prison are people of color. This is true and it's a fact. In the last 20 years, we've been built, just in the state of California, 22 prisons. And predominantly, those that are incarcerated are African Americans and brown men. That is a fact. So therefore, this whole case had to do with this criminal justice system. You've never heard the family at one time in any of our statements called Johannes Mesley a racist. We were appalled at what he did, and we stated clearly we expected an apology. For the 2-year time period, he never gave an apology. And even in his own written statement, he stated that he would not have done what he had done had Oscar been resisting. The judge said that he truly believed that Mesley was remorseful, but he didn't hear that Mesley said that, I'm not saying that I really made a mistake in the sense that I should be remorseful. What I did was because of the result of Oscar Grant. He did not take responsibility for his actions. He never stated that. He put it back on Oscar. He put it back on the young men on the platform. And the sad note is that we have a judicial figure who tend to say the exact same thing. It is clear to the world that there was a problem on that platform, but it is not clear to the people of color that them young men were the cause of their own death, Oscar's death on that platform. Of course, Judge Perry himself said that he is clear that Oscar was resisting arrest. So the judicial system is saying, yes, Oscar is at fault.
Did you hear an apology in Mesley's statement to your family?
I heard a fake apology in the sense that had Oscar not been resisting, Mesley would have never thought about using his taser. That's what he said in his statement. He did not take blame for the simple fact that he made a mistake. He said his mistake came from Oscar not giving his hands to him.
He kept saying he was sorry, though. Did he ever say he was sorry to your family?
He's never, ever directed his apology to the family specifically. He said he was sorry for what he did, and thereby he have to suffer nightly with these so-called fears of what occurred. But he never said specifically, as one would when they make a mistake, that I'm sorry for what I did to you.
Cephus, when you heard that sentence come down, what was the first thing that went through your head?
Well, you heard my impact statement. I knew what the judge was going to say before he even said it, because he made it clear through the jury instructions argument. I sat in that room. This whole thing was argued before we even got to this point today. It could have been resolved way before we got here, but it was simply left out to be brought up today to become an issue in this case.
Bobby is 2 years not enough.
I mean, we're talking about murder. And if a man goes to prison for killing a dog and he gets 4 years, then of course 2 years is not enough.
Where do you go from here?
Well, I mean, of course, we've already contacted the Department of Justice, and we're going to take it to the next level to ensure that some form of justice is brought, hopefully through the Department of Justice.
Let me just say this.
It would have been easily simply said to the family of Oscar Grant, to the mother of Oscar Grant, to the daughter of Oscar Grant, fiance of Oscar Grant. I am, Meserly, truly sorry for what I've done. That wasn't said. Well, that's when a person make a mistake and they say they're making apologies, that's how you say it.
Had you heard that, would you have accepted the 2-year sentence?
Delayed justice is no justice. Delayed apology is no apology. Had he made an apology tonight on that platform, there was no legal restraints against him for not making an apology, it would have been accepted. Had he made an apology the second night, because there was no legal restraint against him to not make an apology, it would have been accepted, and most likely as a family who we are would have been forgiven. When he sat on that jury box and began to testify, he did not acknowledge the family, nor did he even imply that he was apologetic for what occurred. And when Rita Williams on KTVU did an exclusive interview with Johannes Meserly, allowing him to express to the community and to Judge Perry about what occurred, he not one time in any of those exclusive interviews, and we're talking about for almost a week, acknowledged the family or even stated he was sorry. And then today in court, we didn't hear no apology. There, you know, this is the difference between people of color and those that are not of color. He saw remorsefulness. If you ask any man or any person of color, did they see any remorsefulness, and you will not hear them say yes.
You know, one of the things that go to this, I thought, in listening to the judge's analysis, that he was an apologist for Meserly. When he says that Meserly did not apologize initially because there might have been legal issues involved, the truth of the matter is there were no legal issues involved. On the night in which this happened, when he spoke to Peroni, he spoke to other people, he later spoke to his friend, Officer Foreman. 2 or 3 days later, he continued to speak to Officer Foreman. There were no legal issues and restraints. And at no time did he ever mention that he had gone for a taser, that he had made a mistake. And that is the most appalling aspect of this case to me, because I believe the evidence suggests to me, and I wrote this to the judge, that this was a fraud that's been perpetrated on the court itself. It's fraudulent conduct, and that he never said in the first few days after this event that he, in fact, was reaching for his taser. If it were true, he would have said it that night. He would have said it to the officers who saw him that night. He would have seen it the next day and the day after that. We wouldn't have heard it for the first time in the middle of this trial. And that's the most offensive part of this whole case to me. And the judge bought it, and the jurors bought it.
Anything to say, Cephus, for family or supporters to the people of Oakland tonight who might be inclined to react in a negative way to this tonight?
I'm not worried about what's going on in Oakland. Look at these young men who were with Oscar Grant, who was murdered right in front of, these are the young men that were with Oscar Grant. I'm not worried about what's going on in Oakland. I'm worried about these young men. And another thing, the judge said he will not let race determine this case. Oscar Grant was called a nigger 3 times before he was murdered. So how's that not playing a role in this murder?
The judge only wanted to hear what he wanted to hear. Okay? All right. Yes, sir. Okay? Thank you. She's obviously very, very upset, although there's a degree of resignation. I mean, we all, you know, I mean, I've told everyone, look, to be real frank, this is America. Don't expect real justice. We may want it, but it doesn't necessarily happen. So this was an affirmation of that. So to some extent, you have expectations, but at the same time, you fortify and protect yourself against the inevitable fall. And so she was prepared that way.
You heard us say as a family from day one that we've been a peace-loving family. We also recognize that there can be no peace without justice. And really, we all know that this has been a very touchy topic. For Rita Williams on KTVU Channel 2 to flame a hot spot by giving an unprecedented interview to a convict, a man convicted of his peers, of involuntary manslaughter in prison with a felony, has a criminal record, the opportunity to get on media, television, to sell himself as if he's an innocent person angers people. KTVU has been protested. Complaints are being filed right now with the FCC in regards to that. And it needs to be redirected to KTV Channel 2, Rita Williams, for if anything go down in Oakland, it is Channel 2's fault.
Bobby, you, your sister, your niece, you all gave very impassioned statements and saying that you think the judge listened to all walked in with already sitting on.
The judge made it clear he heard what I said. He acknowledged the fact that I had already read what he was going to do. Because this was argued way before we even got to this point. This was all by design. I'm clear about that. We're dealing with a racist criminal justice system. Men of color are being arrested and incarcerated at a rate unprecedented. 80% of the men in prison today are African Americans and brown men. Many of them are falsely arrested. Judge Perry set over the Rampart case where many of those arrests were falsified. The city of LA had to pay millions of dollars out to those individuals that had false evidence planted on them, and Judge Perry happened to be the judge over those police officers that got off. He's an ex-DA representative himself. All his decisions is based in favor of the police. All you have to do is look at his history. We knew this when we came into this courtroom, that we was dealing with a judge that had more favoritism toward the police. And today is the best example to see just what we had already believed to come true.
So Bobby, will you ask for Paul on the streets of Oakland?
People want justice. There can be no peace without justice. I'm here with my family in Los Angeles, keeping them calm. I have no power over what people feel their form of expression should be. Had the gun enhancement stayed and involuntary as it was, the minimum that I would have been at least, smiling about would have been 5 years. We couldn't even get the high term or the aggravated aspect of a 4-year term for a murder that he committed. I mean, we're dealing with a system. It's our hope, of course, that some action be taken to look at that. It's never been done before where a convict, a criminal, a man behind bars was given a voice to get on media to express why he shouldn't be incarcerated. Well, give black men that chance, or give brown men that opportunity, and maybe we can see some fairness in it then.
Do you believe at this point that he was an accident?
It was never an accident. I mean, Johannes Mesley first is a criminal, because as you know, before he turned 18 years old, he had been arrested. Johannes Mesley had slapped a Hispanic woman in high school. It's all documented. He had 4 incidents with African-American males prior to the death of him shooting Oscar in the back. Ken Carruthers right now has a lawsuit against him for being beat up by him because he stated to him that he was not a real police officer. That suit starts in February. The night Oscar was murdered, Johannes Mesley pursued an African-American young man who jumped off a platform in West Oakland, discovered he had a gun on him. They gets a call. The initial call was that it was a gang fight, Hispanic and blacks. Automatically, the adrenaline rises, and a person takes that with them wherever they go, and they immediately begin to talk about how their life flashed before them, before they hit that platform. When he hit that platform, he immediately pulled his taser out and began to bark racist word. I don't know if it was racist word, but he began to speak loudly to them young men by intimidation. And as you know, he pulled his taser out twice. He was hyped. You can see him punch Jackie Bryson Jr. You can see him yelling at the young men. He came up there with an attitude, and in 2 minutes, Oscar was dead.
Again, Bobby, if you can describe how you felt in that courtroom. We saw you raise your voice during your statement, and what you felt when this all came down.
Well, the judge told us he was going to throw the gun enhancement out before we even read our impact statement. That in itself was our case. That's what we won on. And to now decide that it's a judicial error, to throw out what we all knew was right, and then admit that I am so sorry being the judge of this case that I made that gross of an error, it shows that there is something wrong with this criminal justice system. It is obvious that it needs to be dealt with. And when a judge can say, I made a gross error and all I can say to you is that I'm sorry, really raises question of whether this was an error or not.